The USS Resolute glided through the shimmering expanse of space, its hull reflecting the light of distant, dying stars. Inside, Captain James Carter stood at the bridge, his eyes fixed on the holographic map, displaying the maelstrom expanse. The uncharted region had a reputation as a graveyard for explorers, but Carter saw it as an opportunity, a chance for humanity to prove itself once again. "Anything on sensors, Dr. Hayes?" Carter asked, his voice calm, but laced with the authority of a seasoned leader. Dr. Marcus Hayes, the ship's science officer, adjusted his glasses as he analyzed the data streaming across his console. "Readings are peculiar, Captain. High-energy distortions, but they don't match any known phenomena. It's almost as if the laws of physics are bending around us." "Perfect," muttered Chief Engineer Kyle Maddox, leaning against a console. His hands were still smeared with grease from patching the ship's engines. "Just what we need. A science experiment waiting to blow us up." "Relax, Maddox," said Nathan Hawk Reynolds from the pilot's chair. The cocky grin never left his face as he guided the ship through the turbulence. "If anyone can keep this bird flying, it's you." Before Maddox could retort, the ship's alarms blared. "Contacts!" Hayes shouted, his voice rising in alarm. Multiple vessels closing fast. The bridge crew snapped into action. Carter's voice cut through the chaos. On screen, the holographic display shifted, revealing a fleet of enormous, angular ships emerging from the swirling mists of the maelstrom. Their dark hulls were adorned with jagged symbols, and their weapon ports glowed with an ominous red light. "Who the hell are they?" Maddox asked, his bravado giving way to unease. The answer came in the form of a deep, guttural voice that resonated through the Resolute's comm system. "You trespass in Zareth Dominion territory. Surrender your vessel and prepare for assimilation, or face annihilation." Carter straightened, his jaw tightening. "This is Captain James Carter of the USS Resolute. We are on a peaceful exploration mission and mean no harm. However, we will defend ourselves if provoked." The Zareth commander's laughter echoed through the comms. "Your defiance is amusing but futile. Humanity is nothing more than an infestation, and we are its cure." "Cut the channel," Carter ordered. He turned to Sergeant Victor Alvarez, the ship's Marine leader, who had entered the bridge moments earlier. "Alvarez, prepare the team for a potential boarding action." "Maddox, get me everything this ship has on shields and weapons." "Aye, Captain," Alvarez replied, his voice steady and composed. He was a man of few words, but spoke with the confidence of someone who had faced death and walked away victorious. The Zareth fleet opened fire. Energy beams sliced through the void, narrowly missing the Resolute. Hawk's hands flew across the controls as he maneuvered the ship with surgical precision, dodging the relentless barrage. "They're hurting us," Hayes said, his tone grim. "Trying to drive us toward that moon." The holographic display highlighted a desolate, cratered world. Carter's eyes narrowed. "What's down there?" "Nothing good," Hayes replied. "Atmosphere's toxic, gravity's unstable, and the surface is littered with wreckage, likely from previous victims." "Then we don't crash," Carter declared. "Hawk, get us out of here." "Working on it, Captain," Hawk shouted as he sent the Resolute into a steep dive. The ship shuddered violently, its shield struggling to absorb the incoming fire. A sudden explosion rocked the bridge, throwing Maddox to the floor. "Shields are failing," he yelled. "We've got maybe 2 minutes before we're space dust." Carter weighed his options in the fraction of a second. "Hayes, any anomalies nearby we can use to our advantage?" "There's a gravitational rift dead ahead," Hayes said, his fingers flying over his console. "It's unstable, but it might throw off their targeting systems." "Do it," Carter ordered. "Hawk, take us in." The Resolute plunged into the rift, the ship groaning under the strain. The Zareth fleet hesitated, their precision faltering as the Resolute vanished into the maelstrom of distorted space. For a moment, it seemed they had escaped. Then, an unseen force gripped the ship, dragging it toward the moon's surface. Hawk fought the controls, but it was no use. The Resolute was caught in the gravitational pull. "Brace for impact," Carter shouted. The crash was deafening. The Resolute skidded across the moon's surface, tearing through jagged rocks and ancient debris before coming to a halt. Silence followed, broken only by the hiss of venting steam. Carter pushed himself to his feet, his body aching from the impact. "Status report. Engines are offline," Maddox said, his voice hoarse. "Hull integrity's compromised. We're grounded." Hayes checked his console. "Atmosphere's too toxic to breathe for long. We'll need to seal off sections of the ship." "And the Zareth?" Carter asked. Alvarez peered out of a cracked viewport, his face grim. "They're coming." In the distance, dark shapes moved through the swirling dust, their forms illuminated by the crimson glow of Zareth weapons. Carter looked at his crew, his family, and saw the determination in their eyes. "This isn't over," he said. "We adapt, we fight, and we survive. They want to see what humans are made of. Let's show them." As the first Zareth soldiers closed in, Carter drew his sidearm. No one surrenders. No one backs down. The crew prepared for battle, their resolve unshaken. The Zareth had underestimated humanity, and they were about to learn a hard lesson. The Zareth soldiers advanced through the dense fog of toxic gases, their silhouettes sharp and imposing against the crimson glow of their weapons. Inside the wrecked USS Resolute, Captain Carter and his crew were a flurry of motion. Each man knew his role, and there was no time for hesitation. "Hayes, how much time do we have?" Carter asked. His tone clipped. Dr. Marcus Hayes didn't look up from his scanner. "Not long. They'll breach the perimeter in less than 10 minutes. Our air filtration is holding, but we need to move fast." Chief Engineer Kyle Maddox was already prying open a service panel with his makeshift tools. "I can reroute power to the emergency defenses, but don't expect miracles. Half our systems are fried, and the other half are hanging on by a thread." "You've done more with less," Carter said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Do it." Sergeant Victor Alvarez inspected his rifle, his sharp eyes scanning the dimly lit corridors of the ship. "We can't hold them off for long in here. They'll cut through us like paper if we try a straight fight." Carter nodded. "Then we don't give them a straight fight." Maddox prioritized the exterior lighting grid. "Hayes, what do you know about the local terrain?" Hayes gestured to a holographic projection he'd cobbled together from the ship's limited sensors. "The surface is mostly jagged rock, but there's a network of natural tunnels beneath us. If we can lure them into the caves, we might level the playing field." Nathan Hawk Reynolds leaned against the wall, spinning a flare in his hand. "Caves are great for ambushes, but how do we get them to follow us without turning into sitting ducks?" Carter looked around the room, his gaze settling on a nearby console. A slow smile crept across his face. "We make them think we're desperate. Maddox, can you rig the comm system to broadcast a distress signal?" "Sure," Maddox replied, already moving to another console. "What are you thinking?" "They believe we're cornered," Carter said. "Let's give them just enough of a reason to believe it." Minutes later, the Zareth commander received a burst transmission from the humans. The distorted voice crackled with static, but the desperation was clear. "Damaged, need assistance, holding too many." It cut off abruptly. The commander's mandibles clicked in amusement. "Pitiful. They cling to life like insects. Dispatch a hunting party to finish them." Inside the ship, the crew moved quickly. Alvarez distributed the remaining weapons, while Maddox and Hayes worked together to rig traps near the entrances. Hawk prepared the shuttle bay for a quick escape, though they all knew the shuttle itself was beyond repair. Its parts, however, would serve a new purpose. "Traps are set," Alvarez reported. "If they come through the main hatch, they'll trigger the plasma charges. That'll slow them down, but not for long." "It'll be enough," Carter said. "Everyone knows the plan. Stick to your roles, and we'll show these bastards what humans can do." The Zareth soldiers breached the Resolute moments later. Their hulking forms moved with precision, their glowing weapons illuminating the dark corridors. The traps activated as planned, sending arcs of plasma and bursts of shrapnel into the advancing troops. Screeches of pain echoed through the halls, but the Zareth were relentless, pushing forward despite their losses. Carter led his team through the escape route Hayes had mapped out. They moved swiftly and silently, using the chaos to their advantage. When they reached the cave entrance, Hawk lit a series of flares, their bright light drawing the attention of the Zereth. "They're following," Alvarez whispered, his tone laced with grim satisfaction. "Good," Carter said. "Let's keep them guessing." Inside the caves, the terrain shifted dramatically. The jagged walls and uneven ground made it impossible for the Zereth to maintain their tight formations. The humans used the environment to their advantage, setting ambushes and leading the enemy into carefully prepared kill zones. Maddox, crouched behind a boulder, activated a makeshift railgun he'd constructed from salvaged parts. The weapon fired a concentrated burst of energy, vaporizing one of the Zereth soldiers in a flash of light. "One down," he muttered, recalibrating for the next shot. Hawk and Hayes worked together to rig a section of the cave with improvised explosives. As the Zereth advanced, they detonated the charges, collapsing the tunnel and cutting off a large portion of the enemy force. Alvarez and Carter held the rear, picking off stragglers with precision shots. Despite the odds, their confidence never wavered. Each victory, no matter how small, fueled their determination. "They're falling back," Alvarez said, reloading his weapon. "But they'll regroup soon." "That's exactly what we want," Carter replied. He activated his comlink. "Hawk, is the final trap ready?" "Just waiting for the right moment," Hawk said. "Give me the word." The Zereth regrouped in a larger chamber of the cave, their commander at the forefront. His voice echoed through the cavern. "Humans, your resistance is meaningless. Surrender now, and I may grant you the mercy of a quick death." Carter stepped forward, his voice carrying over the Zereth's calms. "Funny, I was about to say the same to you." At that moment, Hawk triggered the final trap. A surge of energy erupted from the shuttle parts they'd left behind, creating a massive electromagnetic pulse. The Zereth's advanced weapons and armor systems short-circuited, leaving them vulnerable. The humans didn't hesitate. They launched their final assault, taking advantage of the confusion to decimate the remaining Zereth forces. By the time the smoke cleared, the cave was littered with the bodies of their enemies. Breathing heavily, Carter looked around at his team. They were battered and bruised but alive. "Good work," he said. "But this isn't over. The Zereth know we're a threat now. They'll send reinforcements." "Let them," Maddox said, wiping sweat from his brow. "We've got plenty more surprises." Carter allowed himself a small smile. "Then let's get to work." As the team regrouped, the distant hum of Zereth ships grew louder, signaling the arrival of a new challenge. But the crew of the Resolute was ready. They had shown the Zereth what humans were capable of, and they weren't done yet. The low rumble of Zereth dropships filled the air, their ominous silhouettes blotting out the swirling, ashen sky above the desolate moon. Inside the cavern that had become their stronghold, Captain Carter and his crew worked with a sense of urgency born from desperation and determination. The next wave was coming, and this time, the Zereth wouldn't underestimate them. "We're out of time," Carter said, his voice a mix of resolve and fatigue. "We need to hit them before they hit us." Dr. Marcus Hayes nodded, his face pale, but his mind sharp. "The good news is that the Zereth aren't just here for revenge. They've set up a command hub on the far side of the crater. It's likely coordinating their entire operation on this moon. Meaning if we take it out, we cripple their ability to send reinforcements," Carter said, his mind racing. "Exactly," Hayes replied. "But it's heavily fortified. We'll need to pull off something unprecedented." Chief Engineer Kyle Maddox, crouched beside a pile of scavenged parts, wiped sweat from his brow. "Then it's a good thing we're good at unprecedented." He gestured to his latest creation, a compact but volatile bomb cobbled together from Zereth tech and the remains of their wrecked shuttle. "This little beauty will make quite the statement if we can plant it at their power core," Maddox said with a smirk. "That's a big if," Sergeant Victor Alvarez said, tightening the straps on his combat vest. "They'll have guards everywhere, and they'll be ready for anything." "Not anything," Nathan Hawk Reynolds chimed in, his characteristic cocky grin back in place despite the circumstances. "I'll pilot the shuttle shell right into their front door. They won't see it coming until it's too late." Carter studied the team, their faces worn but unwavering. Each of them knew the risks, and none hesitated. He nodded. "We split into two teams. Hawk, you'll take the shuttle bomb and make as much noise as possible. Draw their attention. Alvarez, Maddox, and I will infiltrate the base and plant the bomb. Hayes, stay here and keep us connected. If this works, we cut the Zereth off at the knees. And if it doesn't? Maddox asked, raising an eyebrow. Then we make sure they never forget what happens when you push humans too far, Carter replied, his tone steely. The battered shuttle, stripped down to its frame and bristling with explosives, roared across the crater like a wounded beast. Inside the cramped cockpit, Hawk gripped the controls with white-knuckled determination. Zereth anti-aircraft fire erupted around him, streaks of crimson light illuminating the barren landscape. "Come on, you overgrown roaches," Hawk muttered, his hands dancing over the controls. "Take the bait." The Zereth forces responded exactly as planned. Dropships broke formation, and ground troops redirected their fire toward the speeding shuttle. Hawk veered erratically, feigning desperation, all the while leading the enemy away from the command hub. Meanwhile, Carter, Alvarez, and Maddox crept through the shadows near the perimeter of the Zereth base. The command hub loomed ahead, a massive structure pulsating with alien energy. Zereth soldiers patrolled in tight formations, their movements precise and mechanical. "We stick to the plan," Carter whispered. "Maddox, disable the outer defenses. Alvarez, cover him. I'll take point." Maddox crouched beside a glowing panel embedded in the alien architecture, his hands moving with practiced precision. Sparks flew as he bypassed the Zereth security systems, his face a mask of concentration. "Done," Maddox whispered after a tense moment. "They're blind on this side." Carter signaled for them to move. The three men slipped inside the base, the air thick with the hum of alien machinery. The corridors were labyrinthine, lined with glowing conduits and strange symbols that seemed to pulse in time with the facility's power core. Alvarez's sharp eyes scanned every corner, his rifle at the ready. "We've got movement ahead," he murmured. A squad of Zereth soldiers rounded the corner, their glowing weapons raised. Carter didn't hesitate. "Ambush!" he shouted, diving for cover. The firefight was brutal. Alvarez's precise shots dropped two of the soldiers before they could react, while Carter and Maddox provided suppressing fire. The confined space amplified the chaos, but the humans' teamwork and ingenuity gave them the edge. When the last Zereth soldier fell, Carter wiped blood from a shallow cut on his cheek. "Everyone still breathing?" "Barely," Maddox replied, clutching his side where a Zereth round had grazed him. "But I've it worse." "Let's keep moving," Carter said. "We're almost there." The team reached the power core, a massive, pulsating structure surrounded by conduits and alien glyphs. Maddox set to work planting the bomb, his hands moving quickly but carefully. "This is a one-way trip for the bomb," Maddox said, glancing at Carter. "Once it's armed, we've got 5 minutes to get clear." "Do it," Carter ordered. As Maddox activated the bomb, an ear-piercing alarm filled the air. The Zereth had detected their presence. "Looks like we've overstayed our welcome," Alvarez said, his rifle already trained on the door as it slid open to reveal a flood of Zereth troops. Carter grabbed his comlink. "Hawk, we're compromised. Bomb is set. What's your status?" Hawk's voice crackled through the comms. "Still drawing their fire, but I'm running out of tricks here. You've got to move, Captain." "We're on our way," Carter said. He turned to Maddox and Alvarez. "Time to run." The three men fought their way back through the corridors, every step a battle against overwhelming odds. The sound of Zereth reinforcements closing in was deafening, but they didn't falter. When they finally burst out of the base and into the open air, the bomb detonated behind them. The explosion was cataclysmic, a blinding light that turned night into day. The shock wave knocked them off their feet, and when they looked up, the Zereth command hub was gone, reduced to a smoking crater. The surviving Zereth forces, leaderless and disoriented, began to retreat. The humans had won, but the cost was written on their faces. Hawk's battered shuttle skidded to a stop nearby, its frame barely holding together. The pilot climbed out, grinning despite the soot covering his face. "Told you I'd make it." Carter helped him to his feet, his expression one of gratitude and pride. "Good work, Hawk. Good work, all of you." As the crew regrouped, The distant roar of Zareth ships retreating into the sky signaled the end of the battle. Carter looked at his team, bloodied, exhausted, but victorious. "We did it," he said quietly. "But this is just the beginning. The Zareth know who we are now. They'll come back, and we'll be ready." The crew nodded, their resolve unshaken. They had faced the impossible and emerged triumphant, proving that humanity's greatest strength was not its technology, but its spirit.